Welcome into the Autzen Audibles Podcast. Matt Prehm, Erik Skopil, Jared Mack on the show. Welcome to your Wednesday edition, or maybe it's a Thursday or Friday. Whenever you are listening to this, we're recording it on a Wednesday morning. Rainy. It's been tough to get outside the last couple of weeks. So Oregon has been practicing inside the Mashofsky Center. We're praying, hoping that Saturday's spring game will be dry. I'll at this point I'll take dry even if it's not sunny. If it's just really overcast and cloudy, if it means it's dry, I'll take that. Sun would be perfect, but it's going to be tough to get that out. We're a couple days away now, guys, and Oregon had their second scrimmage last weekend, and when we showed up to practice on Tuesday, there were some notable guys not practicing. There were some notable guys practicing a little bit more full go. Let's start there, the positives, and then we'll get to the negatives, maybe how it's impacted the depth chart a little bit. But Justin Flowe back on the football field. He's been doing stuff. I think last time we were on the show all together, we brought up that he was doing things, but it wasn't full go. And now it feels like he's probably almost there. He took part in 11 on 11.
Yeah, that's the big takeaway. When they did fastball, he took part. And this, I think this is the first time we'd really seen him do positional drills either. We've seen him operate almost, I think we talked about this last week. And by the way, good to have Matt back on the show because you were sick for a week and then you kicked it. So Matt's back full force going into the spring game, which I wasn't sure we'd get. So awesome. But no, the point I was going to make was just that when the thing with Flowe is, like last week, he started like basically simulating a running back during linebacker drills. And that was like kind of the most we saw him do. And for him to come out on Tuesday and warm up, with the group, like with the other linebackers to do some positional stuff, and then to be a second team or with a second group, I guess, of linebackers during fastball was really, I think, encouraging. And Lanning said the same thing. Just said how eager Flowe was to get back, how fun it was to see him out there, but also kind of pumped the brakes a little bit in terms of like, it's going to take a while to get him back in full form. And he didn't shut the door again. He was asked, and this will be the last time he'll be asked because he won't speak until after the spring game, about Flowe possibly participating. And he said, we'll see. So I think it's possible he's out there, maybe a little bit, but I also would be probably pretty, like, if you're going expecting him to play, probably pump the brakes on that. I think this would just be kind of an additive. This would be kind of another, I guess, it'd be fun to see him out there, but I'm not expecting it is where I'll land, I guess.
That's why I feel too. It'd be great to see him. I'd love to watch Justin Flowe play football again. We've been missing him for a long time now. Barely ever get to see him on the field. But because we barely have ever got to see him on the field, I don't think there's any reason to rush him back. And basically that's what Oregon's been doing this entire spring camp. He really hasn't done anything in spring camp so far up until Tuesday. He's gone through warm-up drills, literally just like stretches and working out with the rehab group. I believe last week was the first time we saw him participate in any linebacking drill or position drills, and he wasn't even emulating a linebacker. Yeah. He was a running back. So that was something. I think, like the first note of a potential Flowe return was, I think a week ago where somebody asked if Justin Flowe would be able to go for the spring game, and Dan Lanning was like, I don't know, we'll see. And it wasn't a definitive yes, but it also wasn't a definitive no. And I thought that was really interesting at the time. And now we have the same answer here a week later. It's just the other thing we should note is that Justin Flowe is still wearing trainers, even when he was in the fastball period, the 11 on 11. Trainers, if you don't know, are just like specialized training shoes that are made for turf. That's what the rehab group will wear compared to everybody else on the field who was wearing cleats. So Flowe was still in trainers when everybody else was in cleats in the 11 on 11 portion, which I thought was interesting. It's also interesting that he was a second team linebacker because that is a group that is pretty well established in terms of depth. And then he just, came right in and it was second team. I think it's a positive development nonetheless. There's no reason to rush him back. I would love to see him play, but if he doesn't, that is what it is. It's okay.
There were some other guys that were unavailable. I think most notably Noah Sewell, but it doesn't sound like it's an injury. It's more so he was just under the weather. We also saw Christian Gonzalez with the rehab group. And I mean, I think it's fair to say he's kind of the expectation for him is to be the number one corner. And he was with the rehab group the 2 practices away from the spring game.
Yeah. Neither Noah Sewell or Brian Addison were seen at Tuesday's practice. I guess the approach is that they're kind of under the weather, or that's what Dan is saying. And so that's kind of where both of them were grouped in. I think that the assumption there is it's nothing serious, but maybe both of them are sick. Maybe they suffered minor injuries, but they aren't available for Tuesday. I'll be curious to see on Thursday if either or both of them are back. I think that'll be telling. At this point, I would expect both will be able to play in the spring game just because they've been with the first team and in full participants all spring. So who knows? Gonzalez, I think he's a little bit more cautious with because he was at practice, didn't do hardly anything. I think it was notable when the team did wind sprints. Basically, everybody at least did some light jogging or full wind sprints. Like Flowe did wind sprints, Popo did wind sprints, Damon David did wind sprints. The second 2 there, along with Flowe, hadn't really been doing much of anything of late, and it was good to see them running. But even Keon Ware-Hudson and Brendan Dorless, who were dealing with lower body injuries, were lightly jogging on the sideline. But Christian Gonzalez and Dante Manning, and we know Manning's dealing with some sort of left leg, we think a knee injury. Those 2 stood and watched that portion. I thought that was not a great sign. I say all that, but Lanning said it's precautionary and he's fine. So we'll see. That's another one of those. I think between Sewell, Addison, and Gonzalez, we'll probably get a little bit better idea on Thursday, depending upon their involvement. I would probably feel a little bit less confident you see Manning and Gonzalez at all in the spring game than I do at the others. And that puts a lot of pressure on the young corners. I know it's a spring game. It doesn't count in the books, but it's kind of been the case the last couple of years. I think the last 2 spring games as well, there were just been down key players, in the secondary. I guess they didn't do one in 2020, but last year for sure, they were down. I think Mikael Wright was out. I think DJ James was out, and it was a bunch of young guys. I think we're kind of going to get another example of that this spring because I don't know if we see either one of Manning or Gonzalez out there. And as we've said previously, it sort of has felt like those 2 had distanced themselves a little bit from the rest of the pack as the top 2 corners. I wonder if Trikweze Bridges comes over. I know they talked about him kind of making that move a little bit, although he was still at safety, I think, at least in the 11-on-11 when we watched. Correct, Jared?
Yeah, he was at safety, yep.
And so I would imagine it might be a lot of Darren Barkins, Avante Dickerson, and recent enrollee Jaleel Florence. I think you're going to see him play a lot. So I think Oregon fans are excited by him. I think he's going to be a guy who plays a ton of snaps because there really aren't too many alternatives. And who knows? Gonzalez might be back on Thursday and he'll be doing fine.
Yeah,
we'll go. But right now, that's kind of my feel on it because unlike the other 2 who you could, if they're under the weather, that makes sense. Maybe they're sick. Maybe they've got COVID. I have no idea. This is hypothetical, but they're not at practice. But we saw Gonzalez there not doing anything and being very careful. To me, that was a little bit worse indication, although Dan's saying it's precautionary.
I think it was encouraging that Dan was so quick to dismiss the notion that he was really injured or anything like that he was just really just being precautionary. But for basically all the reasons Erik outlined, how he didn't run or didn't participate in any drills and really was just with the rehab group all day. It's not the best sign. He's another guy where if he doesn't play in the spring game, so be it. Yeah. We know Dante Manning isn't playing. He's still in that left knee brace, or left leg brace really goes all the way up. But Manning is just a quick side note. Manning is always in really good spirits on the sideline when he warms up with the rehab group. So I think that's a positive development because I don't know about you guys, but if I had some catastrophic season-ending injury, I would not be happy. Would not be a happy camper. So it's good to see Manning and all those guys. But specifically for Sewell and Addison, I think it's also encouraging that it's a sickness. Lanning for Sewell specifically mentioned that he was under the weather. Addison seemed to be both under the weather and banged up. So that was kind of a coach talk moment, which is fine. But in his place, quickly going to defense, we had Bennett Williams line up as a deep safety and then Jamal Hill at the star safety, something that think a lot of people have talked about before and how to get both of those guys onto the field because those are your best safeties. But Addison for the entire spring camp has been with Triquez Bridges as the number one deep safety. Just a few things to keep an eye on. Obviously, the spring game is important. It's fun for the fans. It's fun for us. But it is not the end of the world if somebody doesn't play because they're kind of banged up. And the staff wants to be cautious, and I don't think that's a bad thing, especially considering how many injuries happened last year. I think most Oregon fans would say, sure, hold up, don't put them in the game. We don't want any more injuries. We're good. Just have some fun. Let Aaron Smith have 44 carries again, and Dondrell Brooks can take all the snaps at cornerback.
Fourth week of spring practice, and we did get to see some 11-on-11 again. And look, it's a rotation, and this is the first time that we saw Bo Nix work with the third team offense. Ty Thompson was with the first group. Jay Butterfield was with the second group, and we should know, I felt like maybe it was just me, but the third group on offense, which had Bo Nix, they were probably the ones that moved the ball maybe the most efficiently down the field. It's a group of skill guys that were Bo Nix and then Delgado and Lowe. I think walk-on Tyler Nanny was the tight end. They had a walk-on running back, Hassenritter at that position. And yet Nix was able to move the offense, I felt like, and it was, that's notable to me.
Yeah, it's about 5 plays for each group. I don't know. I'm not taking a ton away from it. I'm guessing the competition drills later in the day are probably a lot more instructive. I hate to say it, because they're doing not to say it's not competition what we're watching, but they're in situations that are probably more game-like than where this feels like they're just trying to get plays out quick. But you're not wrong at all, Matt. Justice Lowe and Josh Delgado both had nice plays and nice catches. Lowe probably had the biggest play from scrimmage of Tuesday's practice on about 15, 20 yards. Caught a pass to the middle of the field, made a couple guys miss and got upfield. They were in full pads, by the way, so it was full contact. Sean Dollars, by the way, running with the first team, had a couple of nice runs, I thought. Ty Thompson, as you said, Matt, was the quarterback there. Not a ton of success throwing. I'm not sure if he threw a completion. I'd have to go back and look at my notes. And maybe one.
Maybe. I don't off my memory, I don't specifically remember, but might have been one.
I will say the most, and again, these are 15 plays. It's coming fast. The biggest play, the most explosive play, if there really is one, was the one below with the third team, and Nix was the quarterback there.
Yeah, it was not a good day for the quarterbacks in general. I think Bo had obviously the best day, but he had 2 completions, and he was going against the third team defense with scholarship wide receivers when the third team defense had, 6 total scholarship players. So that's his pickings. He should be doing well there. But I do think it's really interesting that this is a pure rotation of players and a pure rotation of quarterbacks. This is the first time that we have seen at media availability during practice that Bo Nix is on the third team. We've seen every other quarterback be on the third team, and Ty Thompson and Jay Butterfield. We've now seen every quarterback take part with every group, not team, every first, second, or third group. I just think it's interesting. I don't know if that means a whole lot. I don't know if we're just reading the tea leaves too much to say that this is still a really open battle. I would suspect it is still an open competition, but I do think that at least what they're showing to us, that they're really going through all the options here as a coaching staff and trying to figure out who is the best quarterback to lead the team for the upcoming season.
We should also note that we got some more details on this spring game. Dan Lanning continues to say it's going to resemble as close to a spring game or a normal game as they possibly can. And we don't yet have the full rosters, but it's starting to trickle out here a little bit. They've released some receivers and DBs for the yellow and the green teams. And it feels like, and I'm excited for this part because typically a lot of schools just try and make up some funky system and, have practice and call it a spring game. It feels like this is going to be an actual game, which is very beneficial for us to learn a bunch of information, and it's just more enjoyable.
Yeah, do you remember when Helfrich and Aliotti had their kind of scuffle over the scoring of a spring game where the offense scored 2 touchdowns, but they won? Or maybe I forget what the scoring was, but it was absolutely absurd. The defense could not have any success, and they scored it that way. This is not that, and it also is not ones versus twos, ones versus ones. It's as we've seen already on Tuesday, and by the time you're listening to this, there might be more teams announced. But Tuesday afternoon / evening, they kind of information dumped. I thought it was kind of a cool approach, by the way, on this. But just here's all the run. Here's where the defensive backs are playing, or the corners are playing. Which teams, yellow and green? They're splitting up between yellow and green. Same thing with the receivers. Each of the players on each of the teams get a little 15 to 20 second video they posted on social media, telling which team they were playing on, encouraging people to come out and bring non-perishable food items. I just thought that was a really cool approach, especially because as Jared and Matt and I were messaging on Slack, it's I didn't know who several of these guys were. We've been watching practice, and there's probably a dozen or more walk-ons that are on the team who just haven't been on the roster we've been handed. And so we learned who some of those guys were, which is kind of fun. This is going to be, from all accounts, a game. And I'm going to guess they're going to probably play the first half normal, clock, and the second half's probably going to be running because it can't go over the allotted 2. Maybe they have a little wiggle room, maybe a little more than 2 hours because it is technically still a practice workout. It's not a game. So I think that's what you're going to see. And I think it's going to be split clearly pretty evenly. We don't know the methodology behind how they're splitting it, if it was a draft, if they were just choosing to pick the players and, how it went down. But it looks like they're doing it fairly evenly based upon the way it's been split so far. And it doesn't feel like it's ones versus twos like it had. I think Mario kind of would go good on good and then also ones versus twos at different times during his spring games. This feels like it's a mix of talent, which is not going to tip their hand at all in terms of what a depth chart looks like, which is smart. But is also going to probably be a really cool and fun indication of kind of how some of these groups could work together and kind of just seeing individually how some of these players compete with each other. So I think it's going to make for a fun spring game. As you can see, though, and with some of the injury concerns, the corner depth could be – there's going to be guys who Jared and Matt and I didn't know 48 hours ago what their names were, who are probably going to play a lot of snaps at corner.
Yeah, the cornerback depth is going to be something to watch. I'm just excited overall. Just to see the rosters announced, at least for the DBs and wide receivers, I thought that was an interesting way of doing it. I didn't, like Erik mentioned with Cristobal the last few years, it's really just been the ones, the twos, and the threes going at each other. First team offense, first team defense, whatever. This will be a lot more intertwined. You'll get to see a lot more snaps for players who maybe wouldn't have gotten a lot of snaps, say they were on the third team or even the second team at points. It'll just be fun. I think you'll get a lot of different matchups that you don't expect. We'll see what the rest of the rosters look like in terms of what I'm assuming they'll probably split up all the linebackers, stuff like that. I doubt they'll do something like that for the quarterbacks. I think they'll just kind of throw them out there and have them go at it with whatever team that is on the field. But yeah, it's the one annoying thing is that it was super smart of them to do it like this, to not show their hand. And that's going to make, it's going to make our job difficult. But it's smart of Dan Lanning and company. That's just a little like a hidden trick almost, where it's well, this is the chance to show exactly who the ones, the twos, and the threes are in our depth chart. But we've said all spring camp, there isn't a 1 or 2 or a 3 team. This is going to be, and if you're looking at that, you're looking at the wrong thing. So here we are continuously looking at the wrong thing, because here I am trying to figure out who's going to be the first team and second team offense and defense.
I wouldn't be surprised if the quarterbacks are not assigned one team.
Mm-hmm.
That's
what I was saying. Just throw them out there.
They're going to be in red jerseys, and they're not going to be on either team. And because I was going to say, at one point I was like, well, the guy that's the scholarship guy that's by himself with AJ Abbott.
I I was wondering the same thing.
Like that will help dictate a little bit, because maybe that guy gets more reps until the fourth quarter, and then AJ Abbott takes all of it in that situation. Because then it's an opportunity. Hey, let's get this guy a ton of reps, see what he can do. Maybe it's the third guy, or maybe it's the number 2, and you want to see how he handles things. But it wouldn't blow me away if they just, all right, yellow team is first series, it has Bo Nix, green team has Jay Butterfield, and then yellow team, Jay Butterfield comes out again for a second series in a row, but for the other team. So that's kind of where I'm leaning that they land. It's going to be tough, like you guys said, of figuring out depth charts, but I think I'll probably be going back and watching, when I watch the film of it, more just the matchups and seeing, okay, let's say Christian Gonzalez does play. Like, how does he fare if he's matched up against, Dante Thornton the entire game? Like that would tell me something.
I was just going to say, like, not having the depth chart maybe frees us to just kind of assess and analyze
the game.
The game a little more naturally, which is probably not a bad thing. Because I will say, like, we talk about some of the practice takeaways from those fastball periods, and it's kind of hard because I'm scribbling down numbers the entire time. And then kind of by the fourth or fifth rep, I've got all the numbers written down, and I'm kind of then processing what's happening. So I'm certainly missing things. And that's why it's great when Matt's there taking photos. We can go back and kind of see who caught passes and what happened. It's going to be kind of maybe a little bit freeing almost to not have to be worried about the depth chart as a viewer like us who are so tightly on kind of like, okay, who's with the second team left? Who's the second team left guard? And, oh man, this guy's playing that position. Well, he was over here. Like that stuff kind of goes out the window, and we can just kind of enjoy the game. It will be notable to see there'll be some insights of like, who's playing left tackle? Is this guy playing the Mike, or the Mac? Not the Mike, the Money or the Mac.
Money. Please.
Linebacker, who's playing nickel, like those kind of things will be like positionally we'll be able to take away from, but because there's no clear-cut depth chart, I do think we'll be able to maybe just kind of enjoy and process a little bit better some of the things we see out there.
I was going to say, it's like, we're definitely going to enjoy it a little bit more about not having to worry about a depth chart, but we're still going to go in there and be looking at who's playing what position, like literally every single down, and then pointing out like, oh, who's 46? Who is this? Like, what position is that?
Devin Morrow.
Yeah. I was hoping you would get that one. It's it's still going to be a lot of fun. I'm super excited. It's going to be the first spring game with fans too in a little bit of time. So should be plenty of them. And like Erik brought this up a long time ago when we started this segment, each of the players on the yellow and green, if they have a social media, specifically a Twitter account, they posted their 10 to 15 second video asking fans to come to the game, donate canned goods, and either rep green or yellow depending on what team they were. I think it's been social media in general for Oregon football has been a lot of fun in the last couple months. But this one specifically was a lot of fun to be able to see and put a lot of names to faces and faces to names for the team, and us too, like Erik mentioned. But just another exciting time in Oregon football.
Should also note that I can't recall a spring game getting this much just promotion. You touched on it there, Jared, but like I was driving my kids to school today, and all of a sudden Kenny Dillingham was on the radio asking people to come to the games, like in an ad. Like I don't recall the last time Oregon had its head coach on a sponsored ad by the University of Oregon to have fans come out, let alone a coordinator doing it. The promotion here. I mean, like when Lanning first showed up and all the assistants first got here, and like spring ball got announced back in February or January, whenever it was, like they were all like, pack Autzen, let's get Autzen going for the spring game. And like every staff does that. Like every new staff, like, oh yeah, we want the biggest crowd. But like this feels different. This like they're actually out there, doing their social media marketing really hard to truly pack Autzen. I'm gonna be curious what the crowd's gonna be like, because like Jared said, first fans in Autzen Stadium for a while.
I'm really curious what the fan turnout is. I know quite a few friends and family of mine are waiting on the weather.
Yeah.
Because as Matt
It
said,
looks good. It looks good for now.
Great right now. And I thought it was funny because I think it was James Creppy of the Oregonian who asked Dan, like, what are you looking for from the spring game or hoping fans take away? I think the first thing he said it's going to be great weather, because I think that preempts the concerns that are out there right now. Because even right now as we're recording this, I can hear the rain coming down outside. So it's
not good.
It's been wet, and they've been in the Machowski now for 2 straight weeks, and I'm guessing on Thursday they'll be there again. The weather forecast looks like it's clearing. It looks like it could be a really beautiful day. I think, sadly, I hate to say it because it seems kind of a small thing, but it's also not. Like, if you have the choice between sitting in your dry apartment or home and watching the game on the Pac-12 networks, or going to the game and sitting in the rain, it's a tough choice. But if it's a really nice day outside, I think you could see, I don't know, I'm not sure what the number should be, 30,000. I mean, like, you could get a good turnout.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I think you can get that much, if not even, maybe even more, honestly, because it's like we've been saying, it's the first spring game in 2 years. There's going to have fans there, and everybody's waiting for a good weekend in Eugene. Remember, like 2-3 weeks ago, there was like that 77 day, like a middle of the week, and everybody's outside. I'm driving around campus, and there's just kids playing beer die, all that. Everybody's dying for a really nice weekend, and it seems like for right now on the schedule, it seems like that's an opportunity this weekend.
Let's take a quick break. When we come back, we had a long discussion with special teams coordinator Joe Lorig, and I think we learned a ton of information about what Oregon is doing and why they're doing it on special teams. All right, welcome back to the Autzen Audibles Podcast. Special teams, I feel like, it is Erik's wheelhouse. Erik, is this your favorite topic that we talk about when we talk about Oregon football, or is it walk-ons?
It's between those two. I just like identifying all the people on the team, first off. So probably walk-on duty, because it's like my pet project of, at media, I'll just be like, give me a number, and I usually can identify who they are, unless it's like a guy whose name wasn't on a roster until 2 days ago, and now I've got to learn a bunch of new names. No, I really enjoy this, and and special teams in general, I have a blast with, just because it's like, I feel like people just kind of ignore it, and frankly, Oregon, it feels like, has kind of ignored it as like a program recently, and that is not how this feels at all right now under Lorig. Go ahead.
We've talked a lot. And my point is it's not just you. Like, I'm all in on it. I think Jared's all in on it. Oregon certainly is all in on special teams. And they start every practice with some kind of skill work. Players have noted the improvements that's happening on special teams. And we finally got to talk with Joe Lorig, the special teams coordinator who came over from Penn State, who is from the state of Oregon or Pacific Northwest. His wife is from here as well. Called it his dream job. Called it, coming home. And I felt like I walked away, and when that interview was done, I found you, Erik, was just like, whoa, there's going to be a lot here that we're going to be able to talk about and write about, because he spoke for about 12 minutes, and I feel like every minute that he spoke was very informative.
Yeah, and I think what makes it interesting is what they're doing is just interesting, right? Like, the subject matter is intriguing. It's sometimes you hear people talk about special teams, and I know we did a little tangent last Friday when Jared and I did a podcast. I kind of tossed Bobby Williams under the bus, but those are always kind of boring special teams interviews with Bobby. Bobby was a perfectly nice guy, but you just kind of came away being like, he didn't seem that excited by it. It didn't make me that excited by it. We talked about, like, he just was talking about fair catches and stuff like that. But like with Lorig, you've got a system that's really, it's different and new. I asked, like, and we talked about this a little bit, I think, on Friday's show, of like the fact that they're breaking it up into basically position groups for special teams and how innovative that is. And I asked Lorig if he'd seen that done collegiately, and he said no. I think he believes some teams in the NFL are doing it. But like the fact that this is just like a kind of a new concept, and it makes a lot of sense. You talk about, I know we talked about this again previously, but like, you wouldn't group your whole defense together and your whole offense together and then give each position group like 2 minutes to talk about their certain things and make a presentation to the entire group. But that's what special teams is usually. Instead, you split it into, and he didn't, by the way, want to talk about how many different groups, because he didn't want to give away his system, which I thought was kind of interesting, because I'm guessing he knows this has worked well. His Results have been awesome. And that the more this information trickles out, the more there's going to be a copy element. Because as he said earlier, like everything's stolen from somebody. And it's only a matter of time before probably most schools are doing it similar to this, or a lot more are. But the fact that they basically break it up into, the left guards and left tackles on punting are in this room, and the snappers and the punters are in this room, and et cetera, for each unit, and that they each get, whatever it is, 15 to 30 minutes, whatever it is each day, working on those specific things. That's really beneficial. The other part that I hadn't thought of, which I took away from Coach Lorig, was team building, is that you now have, a position group of the gunners, which now you've maybe got Avante Dickerson and Josh Delgado or whatever, guys who aren't usually in position rooms together, spending times together. So there's opportunity for these players to kind of build something that maybe they don't spend a lot of time around each other, but now they do. And so kind of this kind of cross training of getting everybody in a room together in different position groups, and they're all working on individual things. It just seems like it makes a lot of sense. He credited Todd Graham from Arizona State with coming up with the idea, by the way. I just wanted to say that, Jared, before I toss it your way. But like Todd Graham was like, you're the special teams guy. Why don't we run these like offense and defense? And he was like, yeah, that's actually really smart. And so he's been doing this. This has been his system now at Arizona State, Memphis, and at Penn State. And again, they've had a ton of success everywhere they've gone doing things with this kind of idea.
There was a ton to take away from Coach Lorig talking. It was like Matt said earlier, it was like a 12-minute long interview, but you just couldn't really stop listening to what he was saying. Just not that it was everything you wanted to hear, but this was a lot of information that you hadn't heard before. You don't really get to talk a lot about special teams to even the special teams coordinator like he is. It's just kind of a thing that people have blown over for the last couple of years at Oregon. It's not going to be like that. That's for sure. And what Erik just outlined with the multiple position groups for the special teams, Lorig mentioned that he was a defensive coordinator at one point, and like Erik mentioned, they have like the position groups for the defensive coordinator for the defense, and he was like, why don't I just do this for special teams? And it looks so simple, but like he mentioned, there's not a lot of people doing it, and it clearly is going to pay dividends. Dan Lanning had talked about how special teams is going to be like the winning edge for us. Like we're not going to lose games with special teams. We're going to win games with special teams. That was a really interesting quote as well. A couple other takeaways that I had from it, he mentioned how players are going to be playing on multiple special teams, meaning like field goal, punt coverage. And it's not just going to be the backups or walk-ons. It's going to be players who can make a difference. So that means starters. That means everybody but quarterbacks, offensive line, and defensive linemen. That's who's going to be on multiple special team units. And I thought that was a really interesting takeaway because remember last year there was a lot of talk of, well, do you want Mykael Wright returning punts because he has to go play defense like right before that? Or do you want Johnny Johnson or Micah Pittman on a punt return because he has to go play offense right after he returns the punt? So I don't think that's going to be much of a difficulty for this year's Oregon's team. I think they're going to put the guy who they think is the best back there, or whether it's a gunner, whether it's a snapper, whether it's a lineman, whatever the case may be. I think they're going to put their best talent forward. And lastly, one of my key takeaways was Joe Lorig knows how good he is, and I like that. He constantly referenced all of his accolades at Penn State and at Memphis. And I think that's a good thing. He mentioned also that he and Lanning, who had met at Memphis and had taught in Arizona State, they talked about how, well, Dan, like you're on the fast track here. Whenever you get a gig, give me a call. And it just so happened to be like in his, Lorig is from the Pacific Northwest. His wife was from Oregon specifically, and it worked out perfectly for him that this was like a dream job, quote unquote, for him, and that Lanning happened to take it. I think he's going to provide a lot of help for this team and a lot of help down the road. It's going to be a fun unit to watch, but I still think the best part is that he knows how good he is at his job, and it's a really good one for Oregon to have.
It was notable that he brought up the fact that it's an effort thing. It's a buy-in thing. of why you're going to be good on special teams. And he said part of his job is sales, because no one comes to college football to be the starting right guard on punt. It's a job that you have to kind of convince the entire team to buy into. And he pointed out that, hey, if you do well on special teams, you will get to the NFL. And he pointed out a couple different players that he has coached or guys that have played for national championship teams. And he referenced how those guys, Micah Parsons being one of them, were all over the special teams units at Penn State. And now they're, he's one of the best players on defense in the NFL. And so he pointed out that if you buy in on special teams and you perform well, that's going to only enhance your NFL prospects, which will instantly, convince a lot of guys, to do it. And then on top of that, he pointed out he like Jared said, he literally pulled stats for where Oregon was at, where Penn State was at, and then where the teams that made the college football playoffs the last 4 or 5 years, and showed them, like, outside of, I think he said Clemson 1 year in which they were just ungodly good on offense. Everyone that made the playoffs were good in special teams and probably elite. And he said that really resonated with the team. And you talk to guys and you can see it. Like, they're buying in. I mean, we were doing the interview with Lorig, and players walked by and chanted off some kind of phrase. Can't remember what it was, but it was something that he had been preaching to the team. And he goes, look, they're buying in. Like, he's getting the buy-in. And I just think Jared touched on it at the very beginning. I think special teams hasn't been good. I don't think they devoted a ton of time to it. They had a tight ends coach who was more like an offensive line coach, whose title was special teams coordinator, and they didn't devote a lot of time to it. And we're starting to see that happen, which is a good thing, and will help this program. As Lorig said, like, you may not win games, but you won't lose games, because if you don't make special teams mistakes, it won't cost you.
I think it was CTG was the phrase that they were saying, which just changed the game, I think is what he said it stood for. Just to kind of run back to that one. Yeah, Matt, you covered a lot of things that I would have talked about more on this sequence. I think the one thing that stood out was, he pointed to the numbers, as you said, but he also pointed, like, Oregon went 12-2 in 2019, but was ranked in like the hundreds in most special teams. Could you guys have been 13-1? He said, I didn't watch the film to know, but, like, is it possible if you were just a little bit better? Because there's clearly a correlation between good special teams and winning football games. And as Matt said, it's not going to win you games necessarily, but it's going to stop you from losing games. I think there was clear buy-in. And I think it's interesting. He also said there were two things that he prioritizes on special teams, which is owning the ball, which means you're protecting and you're not turning it over, and not committing penalties. And think of how many times there were issues in special teams in those areas the last several years of, you don't have to go back to too many of them, but like the Fiesta Bowl in 2020, think about all the weird alignment issues they had where Iowa State was like, oh, there's no one over there. I'm just going to kick the ball to that part of the field and go get the ball. Oh, great. There's just basically an onside kick for no reason. Or, there's countless other ones from a penalty perspective of blocks in the backs and holds and stuff. So clearly that's going to be a focal point. And I just think, and we don't have to continue to belabor too much on the Lorig stuff, and there's going to be a lot of written content. I know Matt got something up yesterday. I'm going to get a couple things up today. I know Jared's got something planned. I think we all just came away being like, he was really impressive. And as Jared said, I kind of like that he's got a bit of a swagger to him. He knows he's done a really good job, and he knows he's innovative. And again, like you mentioned the fact that he ran through his own stats. I thought it was really notable. He was like, I don't want to talk about my system because my system is really effing good, and that's not fine. But my system's really effing good, and I don't want anyone to steal my ideas, because I think he knows what he's got is special and gives Oregon and wherever school employs him an advantage on that part of the field.
I had just one more thing. I think Max Torres at Ducks Digest asked Lorig if he had reviewed any of the film from the previous season of Oregon special teams. And the way he answered it was very polite, but it was basically like, no, I haven't watched any of that garbage. And he said, like, oh, well, I don't really like to look at like film in the past. He's like, I watched a little bit of it. And really, from my perspective, and I think maybe Matt, because he's also laughing at this, is he watched some of it and he's probably just threw it right in the trash because that is not how he wants to have this special teams coach. And I kind of agree with him there, or wholeheartedly agree, I should say.
Yeah, there was a pause for him to think of what to say for positives. So that's why I laughed, because I agree. I thought the same thing, Jared. All right, let's wrap up this show with some recruiting discussion that's turned into an addition to the 2022 team, and that's Kyle Casper, 4-star receiver from the Phoenix, Arizona area, Gilbert to be exact. He committed on Easter, 4-star receiver, 6'5", 2023 class player. His commitment to Oregon the day of his announcement wasn't the surprise. I mean, it felt like when he announced that he was going to commit that day, Tennessee or Oregon. Tennessee was maybe the odds-on favorite, but after doing some checking, it looked like Oregon kind of swooped back and regained control going into the decision date. So it wasn't necessarily that Oregon got him. It's that Oregon got him for 2022. He reclassified. And we see this all the time in basketball, especially at Oregon. I mean, Dan Altman does this almost for a while. It was almost every year he'd had a reclass guy. Football, it's a different deal. It's a different animal. You don't see this very often. And it comes at a position where I think they had 9 scholarship receivers before his addition. They certainly need the help. And he's certainly a big body receiver. He'll be the tallest receiver on roster. I'm curious to see what kind of impact he can make.
Yeah, no, to the reclass thing, I'm just trying to think about this. Has Oregon ever had a reclass for football?
I can't think of one.
I can't think of one for football. I can think of, as you said, a ton for men's basketball. Like that, as you said, feels like that happened like 5 times the last decade. You know, that was pretty regular to be like, oh, and even there was rumors of Mookie Cook doing it. I don't believe that's the case, Matt, but like it's something that is talked about frequently and happens pretty regularly. And Lanning, I think, had some interesting comments. You asked the follow-up of like, is this how frequent is this? Like, what's your opinion on it? He kind of compared it to the early enrollees who are also finishing up high school early. It's basically just one semester earlier than, you know, a player like an Anthony Jones who enrolled in January. I guess a little bit later for a player like a Jaleel Florence or Devin Jackson who got here for the second part of spring. So that part's not totally unusual, but the fact that it's a full calendar year earlier is a little bit different. And I look at Casper and I love the body type. By the way, his dad was a really good player at Iowa, played a little bit in the NFL. His dad was really, really fast, kind of different players. Just a little, dad was like 6'1", 6'2", I think, but ran like sub 4.5. Kyler is 6'5", long wingspan, really good athlete, can jump. Seems like he and Ty Thompson have a bit of a history from being from that same part of the area. And there's a couple photos circulating of them, I think, with Notre Dame, former Notre Dame coach, current LSU coach, Brian Kelly. I think I saw that a couple days ago. They look like they're like 10 years old, by the way. So it's interesting that Brian Kelly was getting on those kids early. Kind of the tea leaves were coming out. These guys were going to be good players. He wasn't wrong. But for them to be on the same team at Oregon, that'll be fine. And I don't know it's going to be interesting to see what he can actually provide. Like, I wouldn't be stunned. I mean, first off, he's not enrolling early with the idea of redshirting because he could stay in high school another year. So maybe there's an expectation or at least some level of confidence he can, perform. But I look at the roster and go like, I don't know, what is he, maybe 6th or 7th? If you're just kind of thinking of kind of where he projects at Oregon right now. I mean, on the outside guys, Troy, Dante, and Chase have been, I think, kind of separated themselves. And then you've got Seven and Chris, who've been top inside guys. Chris has also been outside a little bit, Chris Hudson. So, like, is he best case 6? Can you still have to contend with Isaiah Brevard, Isaiah Crocker, who there's been quite a bit of compliments thrown his way from players and coaches this week. Don't want to forget about Josh Delgado. Like, I don't expect him to come in and start. I don't know if I expect him to come in and be in the 2 deep, but like the talent's there for him to be a game changer. And because, as Matt said, he's going to step on campus and along with Dante Thornton be like the tallest guys at 6'5". Like, he differentiates himself from other players in this roster. And maybe there will be specialized packages around the red zone where it's just we're going to have Dante on one side and Kyler on the other, and we're just going to run fade routes. And those guys are going to be tough to contend with because they're 6'5" with long reach and good wingspans.
Sounds like Stanford.
It does sound like Stanford, doesn't he? By the way, he really resembles a Stanford receiver.
Yes,
Once he puts on 20 pounds or whatever it'll be when he plays at his playing weight, he will be very Stanford receiver-y.
Which, not a terrible thing, no. But the addition of Kyler is really important, obviously. That puts Oregon's, I haven't checked the updated rankings, but it puts Oregon's 2022 class even higher up now. It's impressive that they were able to add Josh Connerly and Kyler Casper right before the buzzer, seemingly. Both these guys are going to be, rolling into the summer. I think July is the time. I'm not exactly sure how impactful Kyler is going to be in terms of whether or not he'll be like an immediate help to the wide receiver room, just because he's fresh out of high school, 6'5", listed at 195 on 247sports.com. That's kind of where Dante Thornton was a year ago. And you kind of saw the physical element of college football push Dante Thornton and Troy Franklin and Chris Hudson around occasionally as freshmen. So that's something to look for. Maybe Kyler has put on weight since then, but he's still 18 years old. But down the line, this is where this kind of talent really comes into play. Like Erik was mentioning, when he adds like 20 pounds of muscle and good weight, he could be somebody. He reminds me of a similar recruit as Johnny Wilson a few years ago, who committed to Arizona State originally. Just that really tall, almost a tight end, maybe not a wide receiver type player. And with how Oregon's offense has been seen by us, at least very rarely with the two tight end sets, it kind of got me thinking that he could be like a package guy potentially, taking the role of a Maliki Matabaum, and then pairing Ferguson and Casper on out wide, where they're more of an athlete, more of a pass catcher, rather than Maliki, who's a little bit more of a real tight end, like someone who can block. I think that could be a possible combination. But other than that, he certainly provides depth. If his number is called upon during the season due to injury or it's a blowout, whatever the case may be, I'll be excited to watch him play.
We should know, Jared, you asked about the rankings. Oregon, from a high school only ranking, 24/7 Sports now has 3 different rankings. They have just the traditional high school and junior college rankings. They have just transfer rankings, and then they've added a combined. From a combined perspective, they are 16th in the country. Miami is one spot ahead of them at 15. From a traditional just high school and junior college transfer ranking system, Oregon has moved up to 13th, and they are the highest Pac-12 school ranked. They are ahead of Stanford, Arizona, and then they're also ahead of Miami if you're into that type of jockeying information there. So this is a move where Oregon, once again, has seen a big jump in its 22 recruiting class.
Yeah, as Jared said, how about Oregon basically probably getting the last points added in 2022?
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I mean, there's not many other big prospects really out there, and there probably aren't many other guys reclassing. So, I mean, unless we see a big influx of players doing this reclassification thing, maybe it becomes a trend and we see several guys in 23 move to 2022. And as Jared said, there's not a lot of time for that to happen now. And we've got a couple months. Maybe we see some of that. Like Oregon might have scored, if you're just looking at it from a team rankings perspective, like kind of they got a couple buzzer beaters, a couple of the last baskets, or if you will, for this class. And as we said, it was already the highest rated class after Connerly. They've just cemented that, and I think jumped 3 spots with this addition of Casper. So big stuff.
Just really off topic. I was going through Texas A&M's historic class. This is stupid. This is nuts. A&M is like 100 points higher than Oregon's class. It's absurd. They have 3 stars. That's it. So, but anyways, Kyler Casper, welcome to Oregon.
It's going to do it for us here on the latest edition of the Autzen Audibles Podcast. Next time you hear us, we will be previewing the spring game. That will be either drop Thursday or Friday, and then we'll have our spring game coverage on duckterritory.com. So make sure to check out everything leading up to it, during and after the spring game. And until then, you've been listening to the Autzen Audibles Podcast.
Talk to you later, folks.
Peace.